Hello, in this video we're going to be talking about muscles associated with the trunk. Let's not waste any of your time. Let's get right to it. Now, when we're talking about muscles of the trunk, let's set the stage for what we're going to be talking about. There are three groups of muscles. Some overlap, but we're going to find out who those are. But muscles that help us with our breathing, muscles that support, and muscles associated with movement of the vertebral column. Not necessarily movement of us, but just moving the trunk and the body around. All right, so when we're talking about respiration, obviously we all know what respiration is and breathing. We're all familiar with this idea. But taking air in, releasing the air, all the muscles are associated with that. So we'll certainly be talking about intercostal. We certainly talk about the diaphragm. That top part that separates. Can't quite see it here. But separates the upper cavity to the lower cavity. But we're going to be dealing with all of those various muscles. Okay, we're also going to be talking about muscles that are associated with the respiration. The abs, the muscles along the ribs, along the vertebrae, all those things that kind of lift. And then set it back down, or let it release, I should say, not set it back down, but let it release all the way through the back, through the front, and through the rib area. All right, so let's start with the diaphragm. This is the diaphragm. This is not a jellyfish, or I should say an ugly jellyfish, or a mushroom or anything like that, but this is the diaphragm. It's kind of cut, so you can kind of see in there, and it's actually kind of cut and then kind of turned. Because you imagine it would set like this, and so your esophagus and blood vessels would be coming down into it. They've kind of tilted it so you can kind of see in there. Kind of like take an umbrella and opened it up, but held it upright. That's how the diaphragm would sit, and what they've done is just taken it and tilted it a little bit so you can kind of see up into the umbrella. But you can see the esophagus there coming down to the center. It's also kind of upside down because that's the vertebrae. I was thinking that was the esophagus extending down, but that's the vertebrae. So it's kind of sitting on it, but where it sits is right below your heart, and it's an actual covering that separates the two. The abdominal cavity and the cardiovascular cavity area, and it essentially supports what's above and then connects and supports what's below. But it actually, when you breathe in, raises up and then releases back down to kind of help with that. Oh. Sorry about that. I didn't mark my next screen, and so it wasn't ready to go. But continue with respiration. Okay, these are obviously the ribs. And what's going on there with the intercostals, that's the muscles underneath of the rib cage. And you imagine that they would raise up. Now, it's not the muscles you can feel on your side. Those are above, on top of the rib cage. We're talking about the ones that are inside, that are actually in there with the lungs and that area, but they kind of help raise, kind of keep that in support. If you're doing exercises for the muscles in the side, the obliques and stuff, you're going to exercise those some, but they're the ones that are inside the rib cage, the intercostals. Okay, so now continuing looking at the ones that support the abdominal wall. Now the interesting thing about this, and we know this is a prize muscle, I mean big biceps is important, big back muscles, big shoulders, those are important, but the abs, having a flat stomach, which I do not suffer from. I suffer from the other direction. But one of the interesting things is that to have good strong what we call abs, the ones right in the front of the stomach, it's actually multiple layers, and then we're going to look at each of those layers. But not only looking good and a pair of shorts or whatever with no shirt on, they have other purposes as well. Strengthening the abdominal wall, supporting the trunk, supporting posture, breathing, lots of uses for the abdominals. But the four main areas that we're going to be looking at is the internal and external abdominals, the transverse, and the rectus, and each one of those is a layer inside of the previous one. So it's a kind of a four-layer system to keep that or to build that. All right, so starting on the very top layer of the four, the external abs. So if you could peel away your skin, that first layer of muscle that you would see in there, that would be the external abdominal obliques, right up front. And again, those are, the ones that you're going to see. That's the, that gives it the shape. But they do a lot more stuff. That's part of the rotation, the turning at the waist, breathing, pushes those organs and keeps everything nice and tight in there with posture as well. And of course, if you're lifting, those are muscles that help with keeping the vertebral column stabilized when that's going on. Okay, now if you could pull those away, and you can kind of see the layers on the what would be the right of that diagram, closest to me. You see the external, and they kind of pull those back, and now you're looking at the internal. It's another layer. It's a completely different set of muscles, but now you can kind of see all four layers, but we'll get to the other two. The internal abdominal obliques. Again, this is kind of an intermediate, and they can cause movement. Like if you want to move to the same side of the action, like if you're pulling, turning, that kind of stuff. Like the exercise where you turn and pull the medicine ball. So not only is it movement that way, but the muscles are pulling that way as well, which would be the opposite if it was pulling the opposite way, like maybe when you're recoiling on a throw or something. But that's the internal abdominals. The third layer, the transverse, you can see the transverse on the diagram. The internal and external have been kind of pulled back, and the transverse is that next layer that's got a lot of cartilage attached to it or connective tissue to kind of anchor it down. But that's the ones that leads more over to the sides. If you were kind of looking at it on your own, you got your internal and external kind of more up the front. The transverse is more kind of on the side. But of the actual muscles, I mean, this is the deepest one, but we're going to see one more that's kind of lower in the abdomen area. But it helps with the movement, as you can see there. And then the fourth member of this group is the rectus. And of course the rectus refers to the rectum, which is, so it's going to set lower. This is the ones that kind of right behind the belly button. It's a good directional point, but it comes from the pubis area, and of course this is what makes the six pack. This layer, even though they're deeper. But they're the ones kind of give that formation. You can kind of see them there in the diagram. He actually has 4 per each side, so he has even more. He's got the one way up there on the upper that's in good shape. But that's the fourth region of the abdomen. Kind of rotating to the back. The back side here, lots of muscles back there, and we'll get into those individually, both in this format and of course in class looking at models and stuff. But these do a lot. I mean, with lifting, moving, stabilizing the posture, keeping the body upright, all those things associated with a good strong set of back muscles. And of course any movement that you have is going to be associated with the back muscle along with the front muscle as well. One's pulling, one's doing the action, one's supporting, and of course the opposite side, once you're moving it backwards, then the front side would be the associated muscle with that. But that's the muscles of the back. Okay, so some others. The main three here that I'm talking about are kind of right in the middle. If you look to the left-hand side of that diagram, they're kind of right in the middle, the iliocostus, the longimus, and the spinalis. The interesting thing about these is they extend all the way from the back of the skull all the way down to the sacrum. So they have long strands, and of course with that, I mean, they can move a little bit with the head. They're part of the attachment to kind of keep the back upright and straight. And of course, when you kind of bend over, kind of stretching it out or whatever, those muscles are certainly a part of that process. And this last one, the quadratus labranum, these are the muscles that are kind of right there. They're at the bottom part of the right-hand side, the side closest to me. But it's those muscles that are coming off the top of the pelvic girdle, the hip bone there, and extend up to the vertebrae. And again, support. So if attachment to the vertebrae and the top of the hip area, then of course lifting up a leg, they're going to be associated with that. The movement of the pectoral girdle in a twisting manner, but just helping to kind of support that area. Well, that's our video over the muscles of the trunk. When we come back here next time, we're going to be talking about muscles of the upper limb, part 1. We'll see you then.